Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmitty, Swanee and Clarky visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Not too bad. How are you guys?
Yes, good for a midweek Wednesday session, all primed and ready to go.
Oh, that's good.
I was just saying we've got yellowtail black cockatoos flying around, so
beautiful.
Every now and then you might hear a noise.
Oh,
that's them. They're beautiful. They're like quite big birds and really, really pretty. So, yeah.
They are. Yeah.
We have a lot of cockatoo action around here, actually. But some of them can be a little bit harsh on the environment. Yeah. I often see a couple of, is it the major mutual ones out the front, and they're like just a couple of them. They just look like old men to me.
Yeah.
I really like it. And we've got two huge kookaburras that live on our garden.
Yeah.
They've been there all winter, actually. They're so nice to see big, beautiful native birds, isn't it? Except when you, as you point out, like sometimes it's a noise and sometimes very early in the morning, or it's like, isn't it still night and you can hear them all at it? Ugh.
Yeah. The sulphur cresteds, when they come across in the hundreds, like
natural habitats.
That's a bit full on, right?
Yeah.
Any news?
It's not for me, I don't think.
I'll tell you what, my honeymoon period of doing part-time work has well and truly ended.
Yeah.
So I've had a couple of days. I'm like, oh, God, this full-time work thing's a joke. Anyway.
Don't tell me about it. All right, well, I suppose we should introduce ourselves. I'm Schmitty.
I'm Swanee.
And I'm Clarky. And together we are
Trial
by Wine. Oh, that was nice.
It was upbeat. What are we drinking?
Swanee.
It's so disappointing. I've got a
raspberry
sodally.
Nice.
I saw it before.
And had sneak preview.
Oh, well, I've got.
How about you guys?
My cold came back with a vigour overnight for some ridiculous reason, just when I thought I was over it. So I'm on a hot toddy, but it does have scotch in it. So, it's
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. It's all the good shit. Anyway, what about you, Schmitty? What are you drinking? You booze hound?
I have made myself my own hard-rated drink today.
Is that a jug of motherfuckers?
No, it is it's got a couple of ice balls in it, but it is a lemon, lime and bitters in soda water with a standard measure of vodka.
Of plonk.
Now, who has a story for us?
Well, I do.
Excellent.
Yes. So this was a really weird one. You know the phrase, truth is stranger than fiction?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of one of those ones, which also, for those of you who don't know that phrase, it's kind of like you can't make this shit up. Anyway, I'll tell you the story and you tell me what you think. But first up, my sources. So Wikipedia, NY Times, NBC News, Time, and a brilliant article, True Crime by David Gran in the New Yorker from February 2008. And this article described the story beautifully and went on, that became the basis of a movie for it. This week, we're going to go to the southwest corner of Poland.
Which corner, sorry?
The southwest.
Southwest. Get your maps
The
out.
Perth corner. That's the Perth corner of Poland.
Okay. I don't think that's the corner I think we are from.
So sort of near Prague. We're talking about near Prague?
That bottom end,
I reckon.
Maybe.
Wroclaw?
Of course, I'm not the map person, so I just say that and then
Wroclaw?
No, so I'll tell you.
Wroclaw?
We're heading to a spot far away from any town or city where the Oder River curls sharply, creating a tiny inlet. There are pine and oak trees on the bank and thick grass. It's a place for fishermen who like to catch perch and bass. And just in case you're wondering what time it is, we're there in December 2000.
Chilly.
Very cold.
Exactly. Obviously, being in Poland, this gives me an opportunity to showcase my brilliant Polish skills, or an absolute opportunity to butcher Polish names. And I think that for Australians particularly, our Polish pronunciation is terrible because we've got Mount Kosciuszko, which should be, I think, Mount Kosciuszko, and Magda Szabanski, which I think is something completely different to what we all say. So I'm going to go with the Australian pronunciations, which will definitely be wrong.
Okay.
Where should listeners complain, Schmitty?
trialbywine@gmail.com.
Brilliant. Right. So, three friends are casting at this beautiful little spot on the banks of the Oda River when one of them notices a log floating. As it draws closer, he sees what he thinks is hair. Pretty soon, they realise it's not a log, but a body. The fishermen call the police, who attend and drag the corpse of a man out of the water. They could immediately tell that this was no accidental drowning. How, I hear you ask?
Because he had no hair.
His throat was cut or something?
There was a noose around his neck.
Oh, God.
And his hands were bound behind his back.
Oh.
Part of the rope had once connected his bound hands to his neck. A torturous position in which every movement would tighten the noose.
Oh, God.
The man was...
God.
And yeah, we'll move on from that now, because I feel like nothing good's going to come if we continue down that path. So he was...
True.
Let's talk about what he was wearing. He was dressed in a sweatshirt and underwear, and there were marks on the body that were consistent with torture. The police guessed that he'd been strangled and then dumped into the river. The body was sent off to be examined, and they found fluid in the lungs, revealing the man had likely been alive when he went into the water. Pathologists noted that there was no food in the intestines and concluded that he had been starved for several days before his death.
Jesus.
The victim was identified as, and Polish listeners, maybe you want to turn this down so it doesn't hurt your ears too much, Dariusz Januszewski, whose wife had reported him missing nearly 4 weeks earlier. He was from the town of Wrocław, approximately 100 kilometres away.
That's what I was saying.
It was. That's what that came up on the map for me too, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, I was saying Wrocław, but all right.
Yeah, well, I said I was going with the Australianisms.
I did say Wrocław originally.
I did think I could do some research and try to pronounce it properly, but I think even if I
Sorry,
knew...
he was from there, was it? Odo River.
Yeah, and I thought even if I knew how to say them, reading them, I'd probably say them wrong anyway. So yeah, approximately 100 kilometres away is where Wrocław or Wrocław...
Wrocław.
Really? That's how you say it?
See, this is the
hard.
issue for Australians.
That's
like, there's no way I'm getting it. It's W-R-O-C-L-A-W. Like,
It's Wrocław.
it's
Wrocław.
really... Yeah.
Yeah, no, we would never have said that. Wrocław.
Yeah, see, I'm not getting that at all. Anyway, Dariusz had last been seen on the 15th of November as he left his small advertising business. And this, my friends, is where the investigation begins.
He was an ad man.
He was an ad man, yes. So scuba divers searched the river and forensic specialists combed the forest. They looked into his private life. Dariusz and his wife had been married for about 8 years, and although they had a brief troubled patch, they'd reconciled and were about to adopt a child. Business records were examined and dozens of associates were questioned. He had no apparent enemies, no large or suspicious debts, and no criminal record. Friends described him as a gentleman who liked to play the guitar and who composed songs for his rock band. His wife said he was not the sort of person who would start a fight and he wouldn't harm anybody. Despite their best efforts, the police found no leads, and after 6 months, the case was dropped due to an inability to find any perpetrators, and the media dubbed it the perfect crime.
So there were no leads, just nothing. It was just
Nothing.
a body.
Yep. So a body that they identified, so not even an unidentified body that they identified, and they had literally no clues.
Oh God, because you know how often in crimes we've seen just depending on where the body went in, they could tell a particular type of flora or fauna was around. Things like that.
Like where the rope came
where the
from.
Where the rope was bought. Yeah, there's always something like that, and I think, oh God, that's so clever.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, wait, because there is some cleverness that comes. So fast forward to autumn 2003, and the Wrocław Police Department. Sorry, fast forward to autumn 2003 at the Wrocław Police Department.
It's Swaff, I think. Sorry. Yep. Wrocław.
I mean, if you're going to keep changing it, there is not a hope in hell that I'm going to get this right. The cold case has been passed on to Detective, here we go, Jacek Wroblewski, Franchy, I don't really know. Anyway, let's go with Wroblewski because I'm Australianising all of this.
Jacek, is that like Jacek or
it's something like that? Yeah.
Jacek.
Now, Jacek, luckily, translates to Jack in English.
Okay, so it's Jack now?
Roble means sparrow. So
Jack
Sparrow.
Oh my God.
So Jacek had the nickname Jack Sparrow after the Pirates of the Caribbean character.
Well, that worked out quite well for us all, didn't it, really?
Yeah. However, Jack thought of himself as an eagle. He was a man with a strong Catholic view of good and evil and relished the opportunity to catch criminals. So much so that when he first...
Sounds like you, Schmitty.
So much so that when he caught his first murderer, he hung goat horns on his office wall, symbolising the capture of his prey. Yeah.
Yeah. Normal. Totally normal.
And in his limited free time, he studied psychology, wanting to understand the criminal mind.
It's Schmitty.
In my limited free time, I do musical theatre.
Yes.
Not quite the same.
Wanting to understand the theatrics of murder.
That's right. Yeah.
So Jack had heard of Darius and his murder, but was not familiar with the detail of the case. So he set about bringing himself up to speed. He felt that to solve the case, he would most likely need to find a clue that had been overlooked, Swanee.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like it. Come on, Jack.
It's 2003, so DNA's starting at this point. Yeah.
He looked through the crime scene photos, studied the pathology reports, and his initial thoughts were, due to the brutality of the murder, the perpetrator may have held a deep grievance against the victim.
It's personal.
Ooh. Given that he was semi-naked, he may have been stripped in an attempt to humiliate him. Of course, he noted there was no evidence of sexual abuse.
Oh, okay, right.
And
I was wondering if that was the case.
His credit cards had not been used after the murder, indicating that it was not a mere robbery. That obviously went wrong.
It's a disgruntled customer who didn't like the ad campaign he ran for him.
Yeah. I said I wanted one that was like...
that's a client you wouldn't want to have.
Not happy, Jan.
Don't call me a junior client. I'll fucking do you.
Reading through the witness statements, Jack was drawn to one from Darius's mother, who had worked as a bookkeeper at the advertising firm. She had said that on the day her son disappeared, a man called the office at about 9:30 a.m. looking for him. He had then asked for some large signs to be made urgently. However, when she inquired further, he said he would not talk to her about it and would only speak to her son. She advised he wasn't there and gave the caller Darius's mobile number, who then hung up without identifying himself. When her son returned...
I'm the killer.
Yeah, exactly right.
I'm going to be the killer.
Yeah. I could tell you, but it wouldn't go well for me.
No.
When her son returned to the office, she asked if the caller had phoned him, and Darius said that he had, and they were meeting later that afternoon. The last person to see him alive was the receptionist, who saw him leaving the office at around 4 p.m. Unusually, though, he left his Peugeot in the parking lot. The receptionist had also stated that she had seen two men seemingly following Darius as he left the office, but she could not describe them in any detail. So now our first round of investigators had looked into the phone call and found that it came from a phone booth down the street from Januszewski's office. Shortly after this call, another call was made from the phone booth to Darius's mobile. While the call seemed suspicious, there was no way to link them to the murder. However, if the caller was responsible for the murder... Exactly right. Jack guessed...
A phone booth down the... Come on.
You should have been a detective. You're good.
Let's get some footage from around nearby, shall we, or something? I don't know. Come on.
However, if the caller was responsible for the murder, Jack guessed that they would have spent time understanding Darius's business routine and known how to lure him out of the office, possibly into a car. So he continued to study the records for several days, and at one point he realised that Darius's phone hadn't been found. Whilst it was unlikely that the phone could be traced, as Poland's network lagged behind other European countries, he nevertheless embarked on an elaborate search with the help of the department's recently hired telecommunications specialist. Now, these two together were pretty good. So they spoke to Darius's wife, who had the documentation from when he bought the phone, and were able to locate the serial number. They set about trying to find the phone based on the serial number, and to their astonishment, they got lucky. A phone with the same serial number had been sold on Allegro, an internet auction site, 4 days after Darius's disappearance. The seller's profile name was Chris B in brackets 7. Not Crispy, but Chris B.
B for Bob, yeah.
Yeah, otherwise this would have been a burning murder, I think it was Crispy, or a donut murder. So investigators went on to find out that Chris B, 7, was a 30-year-old Polish intellectual named Krystian Bala. Now, Robluski, a.k.a. Jack, found it inconceivable that the orchestrator of what was thought to be the perfect crime would have been so sloppy as to sell the phone on the internet. He figured, inconceivable, I can't conceive of this. He figured most likely he had found it or got it from a pawn shop. And Bala had since moved abroad, so could not be easily reached. However, Jack looked into Bala and found that he had written a book called Amok, as in run amok, A-M-O-K. So he bought a copy of the book, whose front cover features a surreal image of a goat, a symbol of the devil. He began reading. The story is sadistic, pornographic, and quite frankly, creepy. The main character is Chris, who narrates the story and is a bored Polish intellectual who, when not musing about philosophy, is drinking and having sex with women. At one point, Chris murders a female lover for no reason and conceals the act so well he is never caught. However, it's the method of murder that catches the attention of Jack. As Chris narrates, I tightened the noose around her neck. This gets our detective thinking, and he realises that the main character's name is Chris, and the profile name of the seller of the phone was Chris B, 7. He picks up the book and starts studying it in more detail. And I think at this point he's like Kath from Kath and Kim, you know, when she speed reads.
Yes, I know exactly the same.
I think that's the visual that everyone should have at this point. Except he has a pen as well, so he's underlining. So I don't know if he's using the pen instead of his finger to do that and then pushing down when he needs to underline all in one very smooth motion, or whether he has to go back and underline. Anyway, you can work that out in your own head. As he went underlining things, he was hoping to find some similarities with the murder of Darius. However, there wasn't much to see. The victim is a woman and a long-time friend of the killer. While she had a noose over her neck when she is murdered, she's killed by stabbing with a knife. But then, after the killing, the knife is sold on the internet, just like the phone. Now, Amok was released in 2003, and the detail of the phone being sold on the internet was never released to the public.
Right.
So, could this, Deirdre Chambers, be more than a coincidence?
When
Probably
you said
not.
that they started looking into it again, I had written down autumn 2003. So when was Jack Sparrow looking into this?
It's autumn 2003.
Oh,
so the book's released that year,
earlier.
But the murder happened in 2000 in December.
2000.
So Jack was increasingly feeling there was more to this story than met the eye. He needed to have a thorough understanding of the book. So he made copies and handed a chapter to everyone in the department with the specific task of finding any clues, coded messages, any parallels with his case.
They're all doing
So they could all speak.
They're all Kath.
But they're not as good, so it takes them a lot longer. He also warned his colleagues not to do anything that would alert Bala as he was out of the country. He knew that if Bala didn't voluntarily return home, it would be virtually impossible for them to apprehend him. The team refrained from interviewing Bala's family and friends, but they set about building a profile of him and cross-referencing it with Chris from the book. They found that both had a love of philosophy, had abandoned their wives, had their own business go bankrupt, had travelled the world, and drank too much. I seem to have a few things in common with Chris too.
Just travelling and drinking.
Not the first three, just the last two. Yeah. Jack found that Bala had previously been detained by the police, so he got a copy of the file. Bala had been arrested for stealing a statue of St. Anthony. He and a friend had got drunk, run out of alcohol, and gone to get some more. On the way, they passed a church, and Bala had the idea to steal the statue so they could have a third person to drink with.
I thought it was because he'd lost a few things. St. Anthony being the patron saint of
lost things.
Who's St. Jude?
Oh, he's for the...
It's always been the local newspaper. Prayers for St. Jude or whatever.
Yeah, St. Jude looks after losers.
Is he now St. Hey Jude?
That was big in the Illawarra Mercury.
It was for years and years. Yeah. Lost causes, I should say.
Oh, was
not
it?
Losers.
That was it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, doesn't that rings a bell? People used to always put like a little thing in the classifieds. Was that a thing in Melbourne?
Yep.
Yeah.
The Herald Sun used to have St. Jude.
Right, so in Amok, police found Chris and his friend drinking by a statue of St. Anthony.
Oh, come on.
Jack began to describe a muck as a roadmap to a crime. However, Schmitty, some of his colleagues felt he was pushing the investigation in a direction he shouldn't be.
Not the right direction.
Well, there's a lot of talk around, a writer will draw on their personal experiences when they're writing a book, so it's completely normal.
Write what you know.
Yeah. So completely normal to have parallels between a character and your own life.
Yeah. If you hang people and murder them, then
and you're right. Just those 3 chapters where I slaughtered this person and then mailed the knife. None of that's to do with me. That's
true.
A coincidence.
The rest of it, of course,
But they're stealing the statue. Who wouldn't, eh?
That's right. The police asked a criminal psychologist to analyse the character of Chris to see if this may give them an insight into Bala. The psychologist wrote in her report, "The character of Chris is an egocentric man with a great intellectual ambition. He perceives himself as an intellectual with his own philosophy based on his education and high IQ. His way of functioning shows psychopathic behaviour. He is testing the limits to see if he can actually carry out his sadistic fantasies. He treats people with disrespect, considers them to be intellectually inferior to himself, uses manipulation to fulfill his own needs, and is determined to satiate his sexual desires in a hedonistic way. If such a character were real, a true living person, his personality could have been shaped by a highly unrealistic sense of his own worth. It could be a result of psychological wounds and his insecurities as a man, pathological relationships with his parents, or unacceptable homosexual tendencies." How rude. Gosh. I mean, the other ones, sure, but unacceptable homosexual tendencies? What is this? Anyway.
It's Poland.
That's right. Yeah. And that is what makes you kill someone. I think perhaps maybe she was alluding to the fact that with the noose and the
stripping,
semi-nudity, there might have been some unacceptable homosexual tendencies going on there.
I think by unacceptable, I think my read of it is that it was unacceptable to Bala or Chris himself.
Yeah, that's what
and
I
therefore
thought too.
He's acting out against it because it's
I see.
That's what I thought.
She's not saying that homosexual tendencies are unacceptable.
Yeah.
She's saying that the perpetrator feels that it's unacceptable and therefore
was inflicted with
overcompensates.
Homophobia and homosexuality in the one body.
Yeah, so overcompensates by, humiliating or killing someone.
Wouldn't be the first.
That's what I thought it meant.
Yeah, quite possible.
Yeah. So the psychologist acknowledged the similarities between Bala and Chris, such as divorce and philosophy interests, but warned that overlaps between authors and their characters were common.
Yeah. She
warned that basing an analysis of the author on his fictional character would be a gross violation.
Because, if you did that, J.R.R. Martin has done a lot of murdering.
Who?
The guy who wrote Game of Thrones, J.R.R.
Martin. Yeah.
Because the number of dead people...
I thought you said Mountain.
Well, the mountain's in it.
Yeah.
Said Martin. I think I slightly burped as I said his name.
Is he?
J.R.R. Martin.
Is he J.R.R. Martin?
Sorry, it's George R.R. Martin. Sorry.
There you go.
G.R.R. Martin.
Yes.
J.R.R. Tolkien.
Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's face it, copying Tolkien.
Yeah.
You heard it here first, folks.
Right. So Jack understood this and knew that he needed more. In February 2002, the Polish television program 997, named after the Polish emergency number. Yeah. How's that right on cue after last?
999-911-911, 000, now 997.
Yeah.
That's a weird one.
So it's similar to Australia's Most Wanted, and it had aired a show on Darius's murder. Afterward, the show posted on its website the latest news about the progress of the investigation and asked for tips. Jack and his men revisited the website and analysed the comments. However, they didn't find any new evidence, but they did note that over the years, hundreds of people had visited the website from places as far away as...
Have you looked at Krystian Bala?
Yeah. from places as far away as Japan, South Korea, and the USA.
It might be where he's travelling.
I went straight to, perhaps they were podcasters researching their next story.
That's certainly what our profiles look like, don't they?
Yeah.
Browser history.
Yeah, correct.
Search history.
So to date, the only thing to link Bala to Januszewski's murder was the phone sale.
Not the entire novel.
Yeah, correct. Jack decided to see if Chris B7 had sold anything else on the internet and made a curious discovery.
A knife?
On October the 7th...
He bought a rope.
On October the 17th, 2000, a month before the kidnapping, Bala had clicked on the Allegro auction site for a police manual called Accidental, Suicidal, or Criminal Hanging. It sounds like a game show.
Deirdre Chambers.
What a coincidence.
Right. Remember we were talking about lesbian or German?
Yes.
It sounds like there should be a game show called Accidental, Suicidal, or Criminal. And it could be about almost anything, but ways
it's
people have died.
Shag, marry, avoid. Shag, marry, avoid.
Well, like I don't know that one, but yes.
Who's selling that online?
It's a police manual. I don't know.
Yeah.
Clarky might tell us.
Well, the manual states hanging a more mature, conscious, healthy, and physically fit person is very difficult, even for several people. Then it goes on to describe various ways a noose might be tied.
Oh.
Now, Bala...
You said that this was a police manual.
Uh-huh.
Oh, probably so that you can identify, like if you look at the way the noose is tied, you can say this person was probably murdered or they've committed suicide.
Or they did it themselves.
Not a how-to so much as this is what's
what you're looking
likely
for.
What you're looking at, yeah.
But also could be used as a how-to.
Yeah, correct. Should you ever find yourself needing it.
Why do you sell that?
Well, maybe as an oddity.
There's collectors of all kinds of things.
I know, ball-jointed dolls.
Correct. Now, Bala did not purchase the book at the auction. However, Jack knew that he could have purchased it elsewhere. He also felt that even seeking such information could be seen as a type of premeditation.
Oh, unless he's doing research for his novel.
True. He also knew that he only had, at best, circumstantial evidence, which would not lead to a conviction.
True. Yeah.
And he felt he needed a confession. Jack then found out that Bala would be heading back to Poland to visit his family.
How did he find that out if no one was allowed to contact anyone they knew? That's odd.
Maybe, I don't know, through passport, immigration or something? Visas? No, I don't know.
Were they tapping phones?
Good question, to which I don't know the answer. But I do know some other stuff. Luckily, on the 5th of September 2005, shortly after he returned home, Bala went to a drugstore around 2:30 p.m. As he was leaving, he was attacked by 3 men. One of them twisted his arms behind his back. Another squeezed his throat so that he couldn't speak and could barely breathe. Meanwhile, the third one handcuffed him. Seems he's getting a bit of his own medicine.
Sounds like police brutality.
They forced him into the back of a car and slipped a plastic bag over his head.
Oh my God, he hasn't been read any rights or arrested, has he?
No.
We don't know they're the police, do we?
Okay.
He couldn't...
I'm going to hazard a guess it is, but sure. Jack Sparrow, he's got some interesting methodology.
Techniques. He's been very good so far. So he couldn't see anything and was ordered to lie face down on the floor. Then they started beating him, calling him a motherfucker and a fucking prick.
That's the best they got? You are a very bad man.
My sister sent me a thing. It was Claire Batten. I don't know if anyone follows her on TikTok. She's quite funny, English woman. But it just goes, yes, so just very important information. I just need to clarify. Is cocksucker said as one whole word, or is it cock space sucker, or is it hyphenated? It's just important that I know this. I just wrote, when he said motherfucker, it made me think of it. Anyway.
Well, I'm just glad that they were swearing at him in English and not Polish.
That would be tricky for you.
That would be very hard for you to say.
That would have been a bitch. Bala pleaded with them not to hurt him, to leave him alone. Then he heard one of them on the phone say, "Hi, boss, we got the shithead. Yes, he's still alive. So now what? At the meeting point? And what about the money? Will we get it today?"
Ah, nice setup.
Bala thought that because he lived abroad and was a writer, he was being abducted for a ransom. He pleaded with his attackers not to hurt him and stated that he didn't have any money. However, the more he spoke, the more they beat him.
This cannot be admissible anyway.
Eventually, the car came to a stop in what appeared to be a woodland area. "We can dig a hole for this shit here and bury him," one of the men said. Bala struggled to breathe through the plastic bag and started to think he was going to die. Then abruptly, they all got back into the car and drove off.
What, left him there with a plastic bag over his head?
No, with him as well.
Right.
Most likely singing, what is it, like the wheels on the bus go round and round, or one of those songs. Yeah. I'm sure they're all very cheery as they're doing this. After what seemed like forever, the car came to a stop again. The men shoved Bala out of the car and into a building. He didn't hear a door, but as he could no longer feel wind or sun, he knew they went inside. The 3 men threatened to kill him if he didn't cooperate and led him upstairs into a small room. They stripped him, deprived him of food, and beat him. Then they began to interrogate him.
Oh, God.
And it was then that Bala realised he was in police custody and was to be questioned by a man named Jack Sparrow. Now, according to Jack and other officers, they picked Bala up at a drugstore without any violence and drove him to the police station at Rocklaw.
None of that happened. That'd be ridiculous.
So Jack stood up and started walking around the room, questioning Bala about his relationships and his business, without revealing anything the police already knew. They discussed Darius, and Bala denied ever knowing him, nor anything about the murder. Jack then asked him about the phone that he sold on the internet. Bala said he didn't know where he got it from, as it was 5 years ago, but perhaps he got it from a pawn shop. He agreed to take a polygraph test. Jack helped put the questions together. The test included questions such as, just before Darius lost his life, did you know this would happen? Were you the one who killed him?
Inconceivable!
I think that's what he answered to each one of these questions.
Yes, it was not no comment.
Yeah. Were you the one who killed him?
Inconceivable!
Do you know who actually murdered him?
Inconceivable!
Did you know Darius?
No. That was sensitive. No, I didn't.
This
is just crazy.
It's so good. It's so good. Talk to me about your kind of crazy. Like good crazy, bad crazy? Crazy? Cray-cray?
Like if this guy is telling the truth and they did take him out and they beat him and then they put him in a room, like this is inconceivable. But at the same time, you know, obviously all the police have said, no, that didn't happen. This guy's, you know, just telling porkies.
Yes.
I don't suppose anyone checked whether or not he was covered in bruises.
No, of course not. Because that all comes out a bit later, right? So it doesn't happen at the time. So there's probably got no bruises from them, if it ever happened. So the last question I've got for you is, were you in the place where Darius was held hostage?
Inconceivable!
Now, my research says Bala answered no to each question. However, I think we all know that's not correct. The examiner got a sense during the test that he was trying to slow his breathing.
He's so smart.
Perhaps in an attempt to manipulate the test.
I got a sense, but was he? I just feel like he was trying to slow his breathing.
Well, it's all inconclusive, not inconceivable in this.
Right, okay.
On some questions, the examiner suspected Bala of lying. However, the results came back as inconclusive. Now, in Poland, after a suspect is detained for 48 hours, the prosecutor in the case is required to present his evidence before a judge and charge the subject. Otherwise, the police must release him. And let's face it, this was a problem for Jack because the case against Bala was weak at best. So Jack was watching the case he'd been building unravel right before his eyes. And so he decided to charge Bala with selling stolen goods. This meant that Bala could be released pending trial, and importantly, that he would have to relinquish his passport.
Wow.
Later, when Jack had Bala's passport, Schmitty, he was flicking through the pages and noticed there were stamps from Japan, South Korea, and the USA. And, of course, he recalled the 97 Show's website. Perhaps the people visiting the website weren't podcasters after all. Wroblewski cross-referenced the dates that the page had been viewed and the dates that the passport had been stamped for each country. And Deirdre Chambers, what a coincidence! They were a match. Bala, meanwhile, filed a formal grievance with the authorities claiming he'd been kidnapped and tortured. In addition, Outrage was growing amongst Bala's friends and acquaintances over the investigation. They set up a defence committee on his behalf. The committee contacted the Polish Ministry of Justice, urging them to ensure that there was an immediate and thorough investigation into his kidnapping and imprisonment, and all of those responsible be brought to justice. Bala was also becoming more vocal about the impact the investigation was having on his life. He said, "They've ruined my family life. We will never talk loud at home again. We will never use the internet freely again. We will never make any phone calls not thinking about who is listening. We all sleep 3 to 4 hours per night and are afraid of leaving the house." The Polish authorities did launch an internal investigation and announced in 2006 they'd found no corroborating evidence of Bala's mistreatment. Jack and his team continued to delve into Bala's life, and a darker picture began to emerge. The years 1999 to 2000 revealed that he was particularly troubled. This is when his business began to collapse and his marriage broke down, and of course, when Darius was murdered. A friend recalled that at one point, Bala started behaving vulgarly and wanted to take his clothes off and show off his manliness. The family babysitter described him as increasingly drunk and out of control. She said he consistently berated his wife, shouting that she slept around and was cheating on him. That old chestnut. At a New Year's Eve,
such a prick.
Right? At a New Year's Eve party in 2000, just weeks after Darius's body was found, Bala thought a bartender was coming onto his wife and went crazy. Bala screamed that he would take care of the bartender and that he had already dealt with such a guy. It took 5 people to restrain him.
I've already dealt with such a guy.
Big words. You're talking a big game, mate. Jack and his men focused their investigation on trying to find a motive, while other investigators tried to trace the caller who had made the 2 calls from the phone booth. Now, the public telephone was operated with a card rather than cash. Each card was embedded with a unique number that was registered with the phone company whenever it was used. Not long after Bala was released, the telecommunications expert that we spoke of earlier on the case was able to determine the number of the caller's card. Now, whilst the card doesn't get registered to an individual, having the card's number allowed them to trace the other numbers that had been called by the card. A total of 32 calls had been made, and Deirdre Chambers, what a coincidence, there were calls made to Bala's parents, his girlfriend, his friends, and business associates. Nice. They soon uncovered another witness who had crucial evidence. Her name, Malgorzata Drozdal.
Such a pretty name.
Yeah. Particularly the way I say it.
Very pretty with an Australian accent.
Yeah. It could actually be.
We could do that to just about any name, can't we?
She was a friend of Bala's wife, Stasia, and told the police that in summer of 2000 she had gone to a nightclub with Stasia. While she was dancing, she saw Stasia talking to a man with long hair and bright blue eyes. She recognised him from around town. His name was Darius Januszewski.
Oh, poor Darius.
Now, to date, Jack had tried unsuccessfully to question Stasia. She'd flat out refused to cooperate. However, they decided to try again. This time to show her Passages from Amok, the book that was published before she and Bala separated, and which she had never looked at closely. Stasia read the pages.
I'm not reading that shit.
She read the pages involving Chris's wife, Sonia, and was so disturbed by the similarities to her that she finally agreed to talk to authorities.
Right.
She confirmed that she met Darius at the nightclub and they spent the entire night talking. Darius later gave her his phone number. They later went out on a date and ended up back at a motel where Darius confessed that he was married. Stasia said she left immediately. She knew what it was like to have a husband who cheated on her and didn't want to do that to another woman, and they never went out again. Stasia went on to say that several weeks after her date with Darius, Bala turned up at her place in a drunken fury, demanding that she admit to having an affair with Darius.
Right.
He broke down the front door and struck her. He shouted that he had hired a public detective and knew everything. He also mentioned that he had visited Darius's office.
A public detective?
Yes.
It's quite the opposite of a private one, isn't it?
Well, I think that's exactly right. But I think in the context of this story, we can go a private one.
Private.
Well, maybe it's Polish for
a private detective.
For a private detective.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
He also mentioned that he had visited Darius's office and described it to Stasia.
Oh, it's creepy.
Then he said he knew which hotel they went to and which room they were in.
Ew.
Later, when she learned that Darius had disappeared, Stasia said she asked Bala if he had anything to do with it, and he said no.
Of course not.
She didn't pursue it, believing him incapable of murder.
Really?
Bala
Yeah,
was
how
subsequently arrested and charged with murder.
Oh.
His trial began on February 22nd, 2007, and the presiding judge was Lydia Hojenska. In accordance with Polish law, the jury is made up of the presiding judge, Lydia, another judge, and 3 citizens. The prosecution's case followed the narrative that Bala, like his alter ego Chris, was a depraved hedonist who had murdered someone in a fit of rage. They introduced files from Bala's computer which detailed his sexual encounters with over 70 women, including his wife Stasia, a divorced cousin who was described as older and plump, the mother of a friend described as old-ass hardcore action.
That's what your mum's friend known as.
Good old ass hardcore action.
Yeah,
She's
I
great.
love a bit of old-ass hardcore action. And a Russian whore in an old car.
Oh.
Just traditional.
Yeah.
Police also found that Bala was investigating Stasia's new boyfriend, Harry. He had written, single, 34 years old, his mum died at 8, apparently works at a railway company, probably a train driver, but I'm not sure. Also, Bala had learned that Harry visited an internet chat room, and shortly after, he posted a message at the site saying, "Sorry to bother you all. I'm looking for Harry. Does anyone know him from Choinau?" Under Polish law, the defendant can ask questions of the witnesses, and Bala joyfully did. He also stated that no one had seen him kidnap Darius or kill him or dump his body. According to his defence team, the police and the media had been seduced by a most alluring story rather than the truth. In early September, the case went to the jury to deliberate, and they found Bala guilty. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. In 2007, whilst Bala was in prison, an appeals court ordered a retrial of the case. And in December 2008, Bala had a new trial and was again found guilty and continued to serve a 25-year sentence. From prison, he's now working on his second novel, tentatively titled Delyric, L-I-R-Y-K.
Derelict my balls. Derelict my balls. What was it? Zane? No. Who's he talking to?
Derelict my balls. Derek Zoolander.
The other one. What's the other one's name?
Owen Wilson.
Owen Wilson. What's his character's name?
I don't know, actually.
Derelict my balls. It's him. I think he's saying it too.
Yeah, I think you're right. Police report evidence found on his computer showed plans for killing a new victim to tie in with his second novel.
Oh, what? What?
So he's actually working on a second novel, and he's got plans on his computer to kill a new victim so that he can write about that in his novel while he's in jail.
Hansel,
that's it, yeah.
His story was made into a movie called Dark Crimes and was shown at the Warsaw Film Festival in 2016. In 2017, Bala's book Amok was the inspiration for a film of the same name. And that, my friends, is the story of Krystian Bala, the man who wrote a novel outlining a murder he thought he had got away with.
Very interesting story.
It's so bizarre, isn't it?
It is. I really enjoyed that. Enjoyed it in so much as I found it intriguing.
Apart from the noose and the hands behind the back bit, that wasn't
awful.
There's no enjoyment
the
there.
Nicest. No.
Fascinating the way he got caught, though.
Do you think that the police did kidnap him and beat him up?
When I was reading it, because I read it as it was written in the article, and I was like, "Oh, this is the police 100%." But then I don't know. He sounds like he's so into himself and thinks that he's better than everyone. Yeah. I think he would. That the thought of being picked up at a drugstore by the police and taken to the cop shop to be interviewed would probably feel like a violation similar to the story that he told for him. Yeah, he'd be so outraged. How dare anyone pick me up in public and treat me like this? When for most other people, I just go, "Oh, you got me." So, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he completely made it up. He just sounds like he's so narcissistic and,
I mean, it was interesting. I felt sorry for poor old Darius.
Gotcha. There was one bit I was a little bit confused about with Darius. Did I understand it correctly that Darius, was he only just talking to that woman?
It sounds like they went back to a hotel room.
Right.
And then there was probably a backing out moment where he says, "Oh, look, actually, I'm married."
And
she's
says,
like,
okay.
"Oh, I don't want to be this person." So
yeah, so that's all there was.
Okay,
I did understand that correctly.
That's what she said anyway, and Darius is dead, so we don't know.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, the first set of detectives did a great job, didn't they? Nah, nothing.
No. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here.
Oh, God. That was pretty terrible, really.
How big a narcissist is the guy writing another book in jail while he's in prison?
Well, no, I think he's sitting in prison writing another book, and I think the bit about the police finding the files on his computer was probably before prison, and I reckon it's got something to do with him investigating Harry, the new boyfriend.
Oh,
so I reckon on his computer he's got plans to kill Harry, and in this new book he's working that story, pulling that together. Yeah. So, you know.
All right.
Do you know how he's viewed by the Polish public now? Like, you know, you've mentioned there was Dark Crimes and the other movie based on a mark. Yeah. Do people fear him and think of him as a bad guy, or is it kind of, do you know if he's one of those people who they find quite intriguing, and you know how sometimes it can set off people in a different sort of way? I just wondered.
Yeah, I didn't see much of that, but I think the point around the defence committee that was being held, you know, he's from a literary community. Yep. We had this with the bloke from Austria, I think, who went to LA. Remember, he was at the Cecil Hotel.
Yeah.
And he was murdering prostitutes.
Yeah,
and he was
the underwear killer. Yeah.
Jack Unterweger or something. Yeah, anyway, so I think he was probably quite highly regarded.
Yeah.
Now, I couldn't see anything about how he's viewed today, but I certainly think that there was that whole thing of it being a witch hunt against him. And,
certainly got that impression at the time,
Yeah, trying to find evidence of his murder in a book that he wrote. I mean, my God. And yet there were enough sort of similarities to keep Jack going, hang on a minute, there is actually something to this. I don't know what it is. But had he not released that novel, more than likely, probably would have got away with it.
And has Krystian Bala, ever... I don't suppose he's that kind of person. He hasn't ever admitted any guilt or...
So I didn't see that, but he was very much, I didn't have anything to do with it and I'm the victim, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Fair enough.
But I think his personality type,
yes,
you would expect that from.
Exactly. It wouldn't lend itself to going, all right, you got me.
Yeah,
I'm not as clever as I thought I was.
I'm not perfect.
Yeah. No, I don't think that's going to happen. Wow, that's very interesting.
How would you sentence him?
I'm still caught up with the fact that the first lot of detectives didn't have anything. I just feel like they should have been something.
Try it a little harder?
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like for such a morose finding, you know, I don't know, it just would have been a couple of things I would have thought you could have gone with. But anyway, I better I've got to let that go. I've got to let it go.
After, right? The book came out later.
Yeah.
So it could just be we had nothing to go on. And if good old Jack Sparrow hadn't been so
Jack Sparrow was on it.
He was really good, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
So I reckon he could be, you know how they have crash test dummies and they test cars? I think if we were going back to the notion of accidental suicidal criminal as a TV show, he could be the crash test dummy equivalent, and he has to die in all of those ways that the people can conceive of, and then the public has to vote on whether he died accidentally, criminally, or by suicide, using such evidence as the way the knot was tied or however it might be.
Okay.
And of course he gets brought back to life so he can do it all again next week.
Yeah. It's all a perpetual, loop of these things.
Yeah, but hopefully some of the ways he dies are quite humiliating too, so that, I think for his personality type, humiliation is probably a very good way of making him suffer.
Yeah, and maybe then we could relaunch Amok, and instead of to any form of critical acclaim, just have people just writing, this is the worst piece of shit I've ever read in my life, kind of reviews in all of the top newspapers and anywhere that you get literary reviews that anyone would consider of merit or concern, and effectively just talk about how he can't string a sentence and his
embarrassment.
He
uses words like public detective instead of private detective. How clueless, mate. Yes. Call yourself a writer?
I know. Call yourself a writer? Frankly, it's
inconceivable.
That's right. Yes.
So I think
I've got something. So I'm trying to work out. I found this little thing that was written about his book, but I'm gonna pronounce this incorrectly. So
Beauty, welcome to the club.
I think it's referring to his book, but saying the quote is, all people seem to be divided into ordinary and extraordinary. The ordinary people must lead a life of strict obedience and have no right to transgress the law because they are ordinary, whereas the extraordinary people have the right to commit any crime they like, just because they happen to be extraordinary. And the person whose view is saying, spoken like a true psychopath. It probably won't surprise you to hear that, I don't even know how to say his name, Bala's murder of an old, it's extraordinary. He thinks that different rules apply to him.
Yeah, but psychopaths do.
Yes. So a sort of a self-proclaimed intellectual, grandiose narcissism, and that's the thing. It hides everything that sits underneath it, whether it is that he's, got his rage and insecurity. Obviously, he's insecure if he's worried about his ex being with someone else or his girlfriend or whatever else. He can't cope with any of that. If you then got to go out and murder someone, that's one thing. But then having to tell people about it, radio, and be so smart, that's the bit for me where I'm like, that's the bit I want to, not the bit I want to punish, but that's the bit where I think that's where the sweet spot is in terms of trying to understand who he is. So for me, I would be trying to do something very public and very humiliating to this man. And I suspect it would be about showing him for someone who's not as intellectual, not as bright, not as accomplished as he would like to think he is, because I think that would be the ultimate punishment for him, which is you're really a very ordinary person. You are not extraordinary. In fact, you're just someone who couldn't deal with their own demons. We've all got them, but it doesn't mean it's telling us to go out and murder people, let alone then be so clever then we've got to share it in a novel sense as well. So something along those lines would be the sort of the bitter pill that I think he needs to swallow.
The whole pill box.
Put him in some stocks, strip him naked, gag him, let everyone throw rubbish at him. Good old-fashioned medieval one, yeah.
Swanee, that thing you read out, I don't know if it was, but in Amok there is a whole lot of philosophical musings kind of thing, and that sounds like one of the... Yeah. There were bits where I was going to include it, and I'm like, oh my God, it's just going to be too deep, but it was so much of that, I'm so clever that I deserve to be able to do these
That's
things.
what this person's talking about,
Most people... Yeah, and I reckon that's Chris's musings from the book. Or certainly there's a lot of that sort of thing
that's
where
what
Chris
I just
talks about why he should be able to get away with stuff.
I found that such an interesting story.
What a weirdo. Ugh, it's creepy.
Yes, it is very creepy.
So are we satisfied with our sentencing?
Yeah, I think so. I think...
Yeah, I thought so too.
There's all themes of humiliation, which I think are important.
I do have a question though.
That's what it's all about, the big H.
And I don't know that either of you will know the answer to this, but I'm intrigued by it because I hear this term bandied about all the time, and I don't think it's always being used in the correct context. I think that it's a word that is popular to use now, narcissism. I think sometimes it's being used incorrectly. But if somebody is a narcissist, and I'm talking like it's been in a diagnosed sense, does anyone know what the treatment is for that? What do they do to help you with that?
I don't know that there's a lot because it's. I think I've talked about this in some case I did where I talked about the way that narcissism and psychopathy and sociopathy sort of all intertwined.
They have like a little Venn diagram, a little bit of
it was a Venn diagram.
Okay.
Yeah. And I might not have shared it, but it was in something I was researching about. One of the cases I did about someone, I think it might have been that woman who killed her family. I think I might have been talking about or thinking about it there. And in terms of, it's kind of, you do therapy, but If someone has no empathy, or if someone can't see beyond something, that you'd have to want to change. You have to
that's very true.
want to be different, and so.
And the very nature of this is they don't want to.
That's the case of any therapy. Yeah.
I would have thought it was focusing around empathy and all that sort of stuff, but I did Google it. Swanee.
One of the things I got was
electric shock therapy.
Yeah, some of the therapy types are the most common with NPD, which is narcissistic personality disorder, but aren't limited to the following: dialect behavior therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, metacognitive therapy, group therapy, and couples or family therapy.
So just therapy.
And then you can have medications such as antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, antipsychotic medications, anticonvulsant medications. These mainly treat seizures, but sometimes, like lamotrigine, can help you stabilise your
this is
mood.
why I think it's important. I think it concerns me that it's being overused so much. Just like terms like gaslight, all those, they just become part of the vernacular. But it says here that narcissistic personality disorder, it's a mental health condition and should be, diagnosed and treated one of those. So calling someone your ex-boyfriend who's, an absolute cockhead, a narcissist, is not necessarily healthy or helpful. In the bigger picture, is it really? I just sort of think...
It's funny you say that, because I was thinking before when you were talking about your sentence and you were saying, is this grandiose? And you're using words like grandiose, narcissist. And I'm thinking, I don't know, I feel like the fake or the possibly fake police calling him a motherfucker. I feel like that's the kind of language, and a shithead. Yeah. I particularly like they called him a shithead.
Yes.
That was good. We got the shithead.
It's so Aussie and so base. And he's this motherfucker. I just sort of thought, I think that actually suits better than kind of this, you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
Such a shithead.
Description.
Just call it as it is. You don't have to try and make it more,
So it's funny that you
more palatable in a more intellectual sense. It's just like
intellectualizing the reality, which is the guy was, what did you call your boyfriend who's a cockhead?
Yeah.
Is that with a hyphen or is it one word?
I don't know. I normally go to cocksucker as a reference point.
It's very important to know. Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, good discussion and really good story.
Yeah,
thanks, Clarky. And as we say,
pleasure. Glad you enjoyed it.
We did.
Miss you already.
Ciao.
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 Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.